Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hi-Fi Preschooling Kids Weekly Training Podcast. We are so glad that you are joining us today. My name is Isaac. I'm part of the Hi-Fi content creation team, and joining me is Rachel and Kayla. We are so glad that both of you are here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, today we are going to be continuing the truth of how God knows me. And for kids, we're talking about I am known. We're going through Guess Who and Real Talk. And today we are going to be talking about the main idea of how God knows my real mistakes. And this is a little bit of a difficult subject to talk about with kids and preschoolers, because sometimes it's hard for us to really talk about the mistakes we've made. We don't always want to say, yes, here are the mistakes that I have made. So to help just dive into this, I want to ask Kayla, Rachel, put you on the spot. What are some mistakes that you have learned from in your past? And listeners, if you want to jump in our Facebook group, you can, if you want to comment on what your mistakes are that you have learned from, that please let us know. But Kayla, Rachel, what are some mistakes that you have learned from?
Oh, putting us in the hot seat. Listeners, this is a zero judgment zone. So that's not true. You can judge us all you want.
We'll see. I want to hear about the mistakes before we say that.
We won't judge you if you put in the Facebook group comments of your mistakes and things you've learned from them. But mistakes that I have learned from. Okay, so if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you might know one of my hobbies is backpacking. And I'm super excited because this is September, and so I'm just getting back into backpacking season because nobody wants to do that in the summertime. It's gross. But one of the things when I first started backpacking, I wear contacts. And so I was very adamant, like, I need something to wash my hands with. I need soap, I need water, I need to wash my hands so I can have clean hands to take out my contacts. I'm going to be in on the trail. It's going to be dirty. I need soap and water. And so one of the first trips that I went on was very cold, like 20-ish degree cold weather. And I was adamant, I need to wash my hands. And it was the worst mistake ever. Like, my hands burned and were so cold, like, for a very long time. The people around me just laughed at me because they're like, yeah, okay, like, you're very confident that you need soap and water, but I'm pretty sure you'll be all right if you don't have that. So I learned quickly from my mistake that there's a lot of things that you can kind of skirt around and not have to do, but washing your hands in freezing cold water in the middle of nowhere at night is not a great idea. So there you go.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Good thing to thank you for. Now I don't have to do that, and I can learn from that.
Now
Thank you so much.
You can learn from my mistakes. You don't have to do that.
All right, Rachel, what about you?
Well, the first thing that popped into my head was something I learned in middle school. And I was trying to iron my clothes to get ready for school. And my mom told me to iron on the ironing board, but I did not. And my parents got a new floor put in this year. But until this year, they've had this melted iron shape in their carpet because I put the iron down on the carpet. And that mistake, I stared at it every time I walked into the room for, 20-something years.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Wow.
That's a good one.
I'm sure your children know that story of like, look what mom did.
Yep.
What about you, Isaac? What mistake have you learned from in your life?
Ooh, okay. So I don't know if I want to admit this. So I don't know if anyone has ever been to Florida during love bug season, but love bugs are everywhere. And as a 7-year-old, I was in school and a bunch of the kids at recess decided we were going to challenge each other to a love bug eating contest. And we've talked about it a lot on the podcast. I'm a pretty competitive person and I won. I won the competition, and that was one thing I'm really sorry that I ever won.
But did you win? You're eating bugs. Is that a win
No one
scenario?
won that day because 6 little 7-year-old boys went home about 2 hours later because we all had stomach aches. We were all sick. It was
Oh
because
no.
the same
Oh,
acid that
man.
takes the paint off your car does wonders to your stomach. And
Oh
it was just a
no.
really bad day for all of us. So never have a love bug eating contest is the moral of that story. Well, this week we are going to be talking about how God knows our real mistakes, whether it's leaving the iron on the carpet, eating love bugs, washing your hands in the cold weather. He knows those mistakes, but he also knows the mistakes that we don't want to share on a podcast or to the world. He knows them and he still loves us through them. So this week we are going to be looking at the Tower of Babylon in Genesis, and we're going to see how God knew that these people had chosen to disobey him, but he loved them anyway. So, Kayla, I want to ask you, how are we teaching this story, and how is that going to point kids and preschoolers to the idea that God knows our real mistakes?
Yeah, this is a really good story for this one. For this main idea and thinking about mistakes, there's very clear indicators that the people are disobeying God. They're not listening to Him. They are choosing what is important to them more so than
Mm,
what is important to God. God has given them a very clear direction that is the same direction that He gave to He reiterated this direction to Noah after the flood, for the people of God to spread out, to fill the earth, to multiply. This is an echo of what he told Adam and Eve in the garden, and that they are to multiply and fill the earth. And so this is that continued command. And the people instead say, no, like, we are comfortable right where we are. We want to build this really tall tower to say, look at us, look at what we can do. Let's give ourselves the attention,
mm,
instead of giving God the glory and obeying Him. And we do that today, and kids and preschool and adults. We want to give ourselves the attention. And I love, there's one way in kids ministry we talk about this, of like putting the spotlight on God instead of putting the spotlight on us. And so there's very clear directives for these people of their mistake. But what I like about this story is we are also teaching a redemptive nature, that we often miss when we just read through this too quickly. And the redemption in this story is that God steps in. Like, God knows our real mistakes. He knows the wrong choices that we do. And He doesn't choose to leave us to just continue in those wrong choices. He steps in. The way He does that for us is by sending Jesus. And the way that He did that in this particular story is He stepped in to confuse their language, to force them to do something that they were uncomfortable doing, that they didn't want to do, but that ultimately brought God the most glory and obeyed His master plan to spread out, to fill the earth. And so I think as we teach preschoolers and kids this story, that's a really important piece to really lean in on, is not just the mistakes of the people, which is important too. God knew their real mistakes, but He didn't just leave them in their mistakes. He
mm.
stepped in quite literally and made a way for His plan to be fulfilled. And that's what He does for us. Like, Jesus steps in and makes a way for God's plan to be fulfilled, for us to have relationship with Him, to have that restoration, to have that new identity. So I really love that about this story for this week.
That's such an amazing truth that we get to share with these kids and preschoolers, that it's also not, it's the posture of which he steps in, even. It's a posture of love. It's a posture of redemption. It's a posture of, hey, this is the right way. I love how we define sin in Hi-Fi Kids is like choosing to do what we think is best instead of following what God says is best. And these people had chosen brazenly to do what they thought was best, to the point where they weren't even kind of hiding it. They're saying, hey, we want to be better than God. We want to reach higher than God. We're going to build this giant tower to prove our worth, to prove that we are the best. But sometimes our mistakes aren't as bold. Sometimes our mistakes aren't as loud and obvious. And we know that with preschoolers and kids, they often try to hide those mistakes because they're afraid of punishment, of what people think, all of these things. So how can we as leaders address these mistakes while also helping kids know that they are secure, that they are loved? Rachel, would you mind answering that?
Sure. Yeah. Um, I was thinking about this question and thinking about how one of the things we can do is create a culture where our kids feel like they belong and that we really do love them, and talk to them about how, yes, you made a mistake. Yes, you made a wrong choice. This happened, but we can move on from it. You can confess it and we can move past it. And it made me think about, like, in my own classroom in Sunday school or when I was in kids ministry, one thing we would talk about a lot is, yes, you messed up. I mess up. We all mess up. And that's why we need Jesus. And he will help us moving forward. He will help us and change our hearts and help us make wise choices instead of wrong choices. And he'll forgive us when we ask him. But we can't run from him. And we can't run from each other when we do wrong things either. We have to go and we have to apologize and we have to be open about it. Kids will sometimes hide their wrong choices because they're afraid of punishment by not saying anything about it. Preschoolers sometimes actually hide when something happens and, won't even come to see you when you call their name. And it makes me think of something that happened in my own house several years ago. Our youngest son I think he might have been an older preschool age in that area, and he was playing with toys in our sunroom, and he flung a stick with a ball attached to it, and the ball went through the window and broke the window. And so we heard this noise and we went to see what happened, and we could not find him anywhere. He was hiding behind a couch because he was so afraid of getting in trouble and for what he did. And so, first of all, we couldn't even address it until we found him. So we had to go look for him, find him, and talk to him about it. Because in this case, it wasn't anything he willingly did to be destructive. It was really an accident. But we had to talk to him. And it was a really great opportunity where we got to talk to him about Jesus and forgiveness and the forgiveness we can have through Christ. And we talked to him even about how when he gets older, there are going to be things he does that sometimes he even chooses to do that's wrong. But he is loved and he is part of our family. And when those things happen, he needs to come to us so we can help him. We can talk him through next steps and not hide from us in the same way we can't hide from God when we make wrong choices.
I love that so much, Rachel. That's such an amazing story. And it's so cool. It's such a great correlation for kids and preschoolers to know not only does God know our mistakes and he knows our real mistakes, but he is the one that we go to when we make those mistakes. It's not that we lean away from the Lord or hide from the Lord. We can freely run to the Lord and admit those mistakes because he already knows it. We don't have to try to hide it from him. He already knows, and he's ready and willing and waiting to step in and to help.
That is such a good thing to remember, honestly, for all of us. And Rachel, I also love kind of what you started off by saying that, hey, we have all made these mistakes. Like you, kids in the room have made mistakes, but also me as a leader have made mistakes. And there really is a value in us as leaders, as volunteers, admitting that we have made mistakes in front of kids, in front of preschoolers, because we are honestly in a position of leadership. Like they look up to us. I love when kids get to come into the room, they give me a high five and they say they're excited to see me because I'm in a position of leadership in that room. But then when I get to say, hey, this week we're talking about how God knows my real mistakes, and I have something I have to tell you. I've made mistakes. Some of their faces are like, no, No, but because it's so sweet, poor little guys. But some of
They
them
haven't heard the bug story. That's
they
why.
haven't heard the bug story, and hope they won't, because we're not giving them any ideas. So, but with that, what are some guidelines for us to know of what is appropriate to share when we're talking about our own mistakes with kids and with preschoolers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's so important for us to be authentic and transparent, and especially in this particular session where sometimes we can inadvertently teach we all make mistakes and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really what we're trying to teach. It's we all make mistakes, and like God forgives us. God has made a way to forgive us. And so the thing we have in common is sin, but that doesn't mean because we all have it in common that it's okay. So I think that being able to talk about mistakes and talk about sin, talk about things that we are purposefully doing that are disobedient to the Lord is important and helpful. But like you said, like we have to use the discernment of the Holy Spirit in that as well to lead us and guide us to say, is this okay to share? And it's really interesting to me, and I'm gonna take our conversation in a little bit different direction, but I'll bring it back, I promise. In the conversation of really hard things with kids and preschoolers, things like traumatic events, or tragedy, or just like the really hard stuff. I was listening to a thought leader not too long ago talk about this, and she mentioned how kids and preschoolers are often open to talking about things they're asking questions about. And so answering the question that they ask is a good indicator of where they are and the level that they're at. And so, things that could be triggers you don't want to talk about, maybe it's, I won't even give examples, but things that are really difficult for kids or preschoolers that are going to bring up really painful things, maybe steer away from those but I think there are other examples of things that you can talk about to really indicate where you have made a mistake, and not just oops, I messed up. This was, helping preschoolers and kids understand the difference in this session in particular between this is an accident and this is an on purpose mistake. I think is really helpful. And so being able to talk and share about those things of like, no, I was stubborn when I said, I'm going to wash my hands in this really cold water. Like that wasn't an accident. That was a purposeful, really dumb decision that I made. And I learned from it, but it was the posture of my heart was wrong. Like I was just, going to have my way and my will be done kind of a thing. So I think those are ways that you can just be intentional in thinking about where's the preschooler at or the kid at in this stage. What are things that are familiar to them that they would understand as a mistake or a wrong choice, and leading with those things.
I completely agree with that, Kayla. I think that's really great advice. I know when I'm thinking about talking to my own kids or kids in our classroom or preschoolers about mistakes or things that have happened in my life, I always try to kind of think about when I was their age. Is there anything I can tell them about when I was the age they're at, instead of thinking about maybe my adult mistakes or teen mistakes or, things that could be more difficult to understand? I think it's helpful. And I try to tell them sometimes stories about when I was a kid and considering, like you said, their developmental age and what they can understand.
I love that. And one last thing I do want to add to that is one thing that I love to do is being sure that I'm not focusing on the details of the mistake, like not giving them all the little details of why I chose to do something or what I did, but really focusing on that forgiveness element of the mistake, of what happened afterwards. What was the forgiveness looking like? What was the aftermath looking like? Because that's where we get to highlight not what we have done, but what God has done for us. And that's really what we want to leave kids and preschoolers with at the end of this week, is not, hey, you make mistakes and you can continue to do them, but hey, God knows your mistakes and he loves you and he wants to step in because he has an amazing plan for your life. That's where we want to leave kids and preschoolers this week. And we are so excited that through fun, through games, through crazy videos, they will be able to learn that truth this week. And we are praying for you. We continue to pray for you. We want to meet you. And one fun way that we can meet you in person is coming up this fall. So September 30th through October 2nd, we are having our Etch conference right here in the Nashville area. And we would love for you to be a part of it. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet for Etch, it's not too late. We would love to see you there. And if you are already planning on being at Etch, please be sure to come say hi. We'll get a fun picture. Maybe we'll ask you some questions that are going to be on the podcast. We'll see. It's going to be a fantastic time of fellowship, but also of learning about how we can continue to do ministry as we help you reset your focus so that you are ready to lead others through change and through ministry. So until next time, we will talk to all of you later. Bye.